10,000 charging ports by the end of this year. Next slide. So this is just some EVSE basics for some that aren't as familiar with charging stations. A level 1 charger is equivalent to an outlet in your house. You can plug into an outlet when you get into your garage at night. It provides about up to 1.9 kW of charge. This would take about 8 hours of charging to fully charge your battery on a level 1 outlet. The level 2 chargers are stronger. They're typically a 240 volt. They provide up to about 7 kW, some of them even larger. We have some in our program that are up to 19.2 kW. And these are the ones that I'm going to talk about in the Charge Ready program. There are also DC fast chargers, which are starting to be installed now across the state. These are much faster. Some of these can be eventually up to 400 kW. These would be destination chargers. They would charge your car in about 15 or 20 minutes. Next slide. So the Charge Ready New York program is for the level 2 chargers, as I just stated. It is for public, workplace, and multi-unit dwelling locations. We provide a $4,000 per port incentive for this program. This program was launched in 2018. Last year, we added an incentive of $500 per port for any installations in disadvantaged communities. We have a list of pre-qualified equipment and network providers that are on our website. You must use one of these to be eligible for our program. Next slide. So this is a $17 million program. It actually started as a $5 million program in 2018. We have added funds to it several times. It's now $17 million. We have found that this provides anywhere from a 30 to 80% savings. And there's a lot of variables in the installation cost. You know, how close are you to your panel box once you get through the building? How far away from the building are you with your trenching? Are you trenching through grass? Are you trenching through pavement or sidewalks? So there's a lot of variables that would change the total installation cost, but this is what we found for the program to date. As I mentioned, the eligible locations are public, workplace, and multi-unit dwellings. There are some minimum requirements for each of these. Public must have a maximum of more than 10 parking spaces. Workplace must have more than 15 employees, also 10 parking spaces. And a multi-unit dwellings have to be more than 5 units. So it can't be a house that you've divided into 2 apartments. And the minimum parking for a multi-unit dwelling is 8 to be eligible. One thing that I think some of the people on this webinar are going to be happy to hear, that this is open to public, private, and nonprofit organizations. Next slide. There are some projects that are ineligible for the Charge Ready New York program, such as automakers, Electrify America, and other entities. Charging for fleet vehicles is ineligible for this program. Charging stations used at dealerships for inventory vehicles are ineligible for this program. And workplace charging at automobile dealerships is also ineligible. The reason for the last two is that the dealerships have the access of funding from the OEMs. So the OEMs will provide funding for them to install charging stations to keep their inventory vehicles charged. Next slide. So you can't stack this with other New York State rebates, like the multifamily rebates, but you can stack it with the New York State tax credit. And the way the New York State tax credit works is you're eligible for 50% of the installation cost up to $5,000, but that is after subtracting the Charge Ready New York rebates. So if it costs you $10,000 to install a dual port charging station, you would get $8,000 rebate from NYSERDA. You would be eligible for 50% of that difference of $2,000. You can also combine this program with the Make Ready order from the utilities, and I'm not going to talk about that. I'll let Louisa talk about that in a little bit. But you can combine those two, which will help. It would help installers install these stations for little to no cost, possibly. Next slide. So as I mentioned, you must use pre-qualified equipment and networks. We have over 90 models from all of the major manufacturers are already pre-qualified for our program, and we have over 25 network providers. We don't require you to use a pre-qualified installer in this program. You can choose any installer you want. I would recommend a certified electrician. But again, there are some people that do self-installs. That's perfectly fine as well. The public and workplace stations must be networked, whereas we allow the multi-unit dwellings the option to be networked or non-networked. Although even with that option, we're finding about 75% of the multi-unit dwellings are being networked anyway. Next slide. So it's kind of a three-step process to apply for this program. The first step is you have to submit a contractor application. And what a contractor application is, this is to get you into our finance system. So this will ask you questions about your company, your company name, your company address, a contact person, email, phone number, your TIN, things of that nature. That will get into our finance. Once you are approved, you will be sent some temporary login credentials for our Salesforce portal. Once you go into the Salesforce portal, you change your password to something that you will remember, and then you can submit a project application. And the project application can be one of two things. It can be a pre-installation application. If you do the pre-installation, you can apply and get 100. Once it's approved, you will have 6 months or 180 days to complete your project. We ask for the permit, the site host agreement, and a quote from your installer. Those are the three documents that we require for you on your pre-installation application. You can also apply after the project is complete. We call this a post-installation application, but you must do that within 90 days of project completion. Most people are doing the pre-installation application. What the pre-installation application does is it actually reserves funds for you. So once you are approved, that lets you know that, yes, the money is there for you, but you have 6 months to complete your project. If you don't complete your project in 6 months, your project is canceled and those funds go back into the program. Now you can reapply, but you can only reapply once. The reason we do this is we don't want people to just apply and to reserve funds and just hold up funds for a year waiting to install a station. We want people to be ready to go once they apply, and that's why we ask for the permit. That typically means that you're convinced that you're going to go ahead and move forward with the project. Next slide. These are just some snapshots that I took off our dashboard that shows the projects by county. You'll see a lot of them are upstate: Albany, Monroe, Saratoga. The middle one is the ports by site. Over half of the projects are public locations, and the other ones are split just about 50-50 between workplace and multi-unit dwellings. And the one on the far right is the projects. Next slide. These are just some numbers that we have to date. We have approved over 2,750 charging ports to date. More than 2,200 of these have been completed at more than 450 locations. We're finding the average cost is about $6,500 per port program-wide. This is down from about $10,000 per port before the program launched in 2018. I also want to note that this is really before the utilities make-ready programs came into play. because those are more recent. So we don't really have a number that I can give you when you combine both the Charge Ready New York program and the EV Make Ready programs together. There is currently about $6 million of funding remaining in this program out of 17. This link is a contact information for the Center for Sustainable Energy. They are our implementation contractor. They are excellent. They know this program very well. You can send them an email here, and I think the last slide I have is the next one. This is a link to our website for the Charge Ready New York program, as well as our program implementation manual. The implementation manual is about 12 pages long, I believe, 12 or 13 pages long. It describes the rules and requirements of the program. I suggest that you download this and read this document before you start the process of installing a charging station. And that's it for me. Thank you,
David. That was awesome. Okay, so now I'm going to bring up Louisa's presentation. Here we go. Okay, Louisa, you're up.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Dave, for giving us an overview of Charge Ready. My name is Louisa Chan, and I am the Senior Specialist on the Con Edison PowerReady Infrastructure Incentive Program. During this presentation, I'll be reviewing eligible equipment, available incentives, program tools, and the application process of the program. Next slide, please. This is formerly known as the Make Ready program. The PowerReady program was authorized in July 2020 by the Public Service Commission. It's a 5-year program that provides incentives that reduce capital costs on both utility side and customer side of making a site's power ready to accept chargers, specifically L2 and DC fast chargers. There are a couple of things I wanted to mention before I jump into the program mechanics. Electric vehicles are coming, so we encourage you to prepare for them. I saw a forecast that projects that EVs will be responsible for 1/3 of all car sales by 2025. And in our program alone, we saw a 300% increase in plugs applied to the program last month. So I really encourage you to think bigger when looking at these projects. If you're considering installing 5 chargers, also think about your future needs and consider installing maybe a little bit more. The other thing I wanted to quickly mention was our program timelines. We are anticipating that EV installations could take anywhere from 4 to 5 months, depending on a variety of factors, including the utility upgrades. So what you want to do is get that process started now versus playing catch up later. The last thing I wanted to mention is that if you happen to have installed a charging station after July 16th of 2020, but haven't applied for our program, you can still apply and get incentives for this program. Next slide, please. The first question we always get is what equipment is eligible? And the answer is any equipment or labor that's needed to bring power to the chargers on the utility side. So we'll go through what that really means. Let's start with the utility side. You'll see here on this diagram, this includes equipment such as transformers and new distribution. Everything left to the point of entry line, what you see is that dotted line, is utility owned. So that means the utility is managing the construction, just like we do for any kind of new load on our system. Typically, these new business costs are paid for by the utility and are not part of the program. However, anything the customer may request that would go above and beyond our existing new business costs, whether it be a different point of entry, second service, or future-proofing, this would typically come out of the customer's pocket, though it's utility owned. But through this current Make Ready program, we are looking to cover some, most, or all of those extra utility side costs that you previously had to pay to cover. So the point of entry line here delineates where our boundary ends and the customer property begins. Everything to the right of the point of entry line is customer side. And as you can see, our program also covers equipment, customer side equipment like step-up transformers, panel upgrades, and running conduit to the site. This is all construction that the customer is responsible for managing and owning, but our program can help cover some, most, or all of those costs as well. And then I do want to point out the eligibility line to the right in this diagram, where you see the EV charger is. Our program does not cover the charger, the pedestal, software, or charger installation costs. We are focused only on covering the infrastructure needed to bring service to those chargers. But we'll, as Dave mentioned, some of the NYSERDA Charge Ready funds could cover your charger depending on their use case. On the next slide please. Yes. Here are just some additional examples of equipment and labor costs that are covered in our program. We even cover soft costs like permitting, design, and project management, which are also eligible for incentives. We've provided this list here because it's not meant to be exhaustive, but really to help you get thinking about the type of costs that our program will cover. While we aren't covering the cost of the chargers themselves, if you're installing L2s at a workplace, multifamily, or public site, you can apply for NYSERDA's Charge Ready program, which offers $4,000 per charging port rebate. I think maybe we might have to update this, to reflect some of NYSERDA's updated requirements, but we can always, talk to Dave about those requirements. I'm not sure if the workplace would still be eligible at this point. You can also participate in both our program and NYSERDA's program, so it is stackable. And we recommend to all customers that you participate in both programs to take advantage of the utility side cost that we can cover, and then NYSERDA can cover some of that, the charging infrastructure, the chargers themselves. Next slide, please. To quickly review level 2s versus DCFCs, DC fast chargers are the chargers that can charge a car in about 30 minutes. Level 2s are the less expensive and slower chargers that can charge between 5 to 6 hours. You can see some of the baseline infrastructure costs that is used to benchmark the incentives in our program here are roughly 1/10 the cost of L2s as they are for DCFC. Another key distinction is that the NYSERDA Charge Ready program offers $4,000 per charger port for L2s, and currently there are no charger incentives for DCFCs in Con Edison's service territory. Ultimately, you need to install what's best for your site and your customers based on the use case and expected dwell time. But I can tell you from our experience on the whole, we are seeing a lot more L2s being applied for in the program because of their ease and faster install and cost effectiveness. Next slide. Here's the incentive structure for the PowerReady program. It's based on two main criteria: the accessibility and the plug type, which determines if your infrastructure costs will be covered up to 50, up to 90, or up to 100%. We get a lot of questions from developers and site hosts who are curious about how much you're actually going to get for the project. And this up to qualifier, unfortunately, is what it actually means. It really does depend on the site cost that you have. And it also depends on how much the utility side costs are that we have to offset. It also depends on the number of plugs because there are charger cost caps in our program. So when you hear up to, that's the ceiling of the incentive for any given project. So what actually determines your incentive tier? First, you have to think about it this way. The more accessible your chargers are to the public, the higher the incentive tier you will qualify for. For example, if you're installing chargers at a pay-to-park lot, a workplace for employees only, or to charge your fleet, you would only be eligible for the up to 50% incentive tier that we can cover for the infrastructure upgrades. On the other hand, if you were to install these chargers at a shopping center parking lot, a gas station, a municipal parking lot, or even in a private lot in which you waive the parking fee to pay to park for EV owners, you would then be eligible for up to 90% tier, so long as you can meet that plug requirement, which is a minimum of 2 plugs. The up to 90% incentive tier also requires that the site have non-proprietary plugs. So this means that it uses a standard charger configuration that would allow any EV plug to plug in and charge. So proprietary plugs typically might include Tesla, and they are still eligible for the incentives, but they would just fall under that 50% incentive tier because only Teslas can charge at the Tesla charging station. Now, if you're installing a proprietary plug, you can still get up to 90% for the site if you co-locate the same number of non-proprietary plugs as proprietary plugs. I know this seems a little complicated, but it actually comes back to the spirit of the program, which is to create more publicly available charging that will encourage a broader adoption of electric vehicles. So finally, if your site is located in a disadvantaged community zone, you're also eligible for the 100% incentive tier if either A, you're installing the non-proprietary or co-located DCFCs at a public site, or you're installing non-proprietary or co-located L2s at a multi-family building, which doesn't matter, it doesn't require public accessibility. So those are the two scenarios where you can get 100% DCFCs at a public site or non-proprietary co-located L2s in a multifamily, which doesn't require the public accessibility component. Next slide. So now you'll see that the disadvantaged community zone was defined for us by the New York State as any New York State Public Service Commission as anywhere within a environmental justice area. Because our service territory is so densely populated in the New York and Westchester area, almost approximately 85% is technically within this DAC zone. So everything shaded in the gray in this map would be eligible for that 100% incentive tier. And as long as you're installing a non-proprietary or co-located DCFC at a public site, or installing L2s at a public or private multifamily building. Next slide. So here, this next map here, it looks like, again, most of New York City is in the DAC zone. I still highly recommend you double check your site in the zone by either emailing us or looking it up on our capacity map here. You can do this by registering for an account and requesting access by email, and we'll provide those links in this deck, and that will hopefully be shared with all the participants in this webinar. Next slide, please. In terms of the additional eligibility requirements, I'll briefly touch on. The first one is that you have to work with an approved contractor. While the utility will pay the incentive for the customer side work here, the work itself is managed by you, the participant, and the work needs to be completed by an approved contractor. There's a list of contractors on the joint utility website. So if you have an existing contractor that you would like to use, it's actually very easy to get them on this list. They can just submit a quick online application through the joint utility managed website, and they will get approved and listed on the site in under a day. And again, those information and details are available on our website or also in the links provided in this presentation deck. Next is who will actually receive the incentive check. The entity that submits the application will be the entity that signs a program agreement and also agrees to the reporting requirements and responsibilities of the program. This entity will ultimately get that incentive check. So we are actually very flexible on who can submit the participant application. It could be the site host. It could also be the contractor and the developer. Really, anyone can submit the application and receive incentive so long as they're willing to take on the program responsibilities and the site host is aware of that. So they have permission from the site host. Lastly, on this slide, we want to talk about the station sizes. There is a 2-plug minimum to participate in this program. For DC fast chargers, if you're installing more than 10 DCFC plugs, you will need to go through Energy Services, Con Edison's Energy Services team to determine if it's eligible for the program. So we're very flexible here, but the Energy Services team will ultimately determine eligibility on a case-by-case basis. Simply because there are other requirements on sites that have greater than 10 DCFC plugs. Here you'll see that it cannot reach over 2 megawatts. So that's kind of what Energy Services will be looking at when determining that case-by-case basis. Next slide, please. To quickly touch on the operational requirements, this is actually a 5-year program. So charging stations must operate for a minimum of 5 years and report quarterly for 5 years from when it becomes operational. There are other requirements related to uptime and what to do in an ownership change, which also must be met. To touch on the next slide, to touch a bit more on the program reporting requirements, the participant is going to be responsible for quarterly reporting for 5 years on the charging station performance, such as the length of the session, the peak draw from each session, the fee structure, and you can see those are in the first and second columns. The joint utilities will also be using the same third-party reporting provider. So no matter which utility you're working with, you can report through the same portal on a quarterly basis. The utility will also be reporting on station data using the site meter. There's no additional input needed from the participant for the data in the third column. Next slide. I want to mention again that there are other incentives out there that our program can be stacked with. I already mentioned the NYSERDA Charge Ready program for charging equipment rebates. There are also 2 Con Edison programs that are meant to reduce the annual demand and delivery charges EV charging will incur. There is first, there's the business incentive rate discount and our per plug incentive program. Those are both for separately metered, publicly available DC fast chargers. And lastly is our very well-established Smart Charge New York program. This is a program for drivers and fleet owners that offers up to $1,000 a vehicle to charge at off-peak time. Next slide. I wanted to also quickly touch on some of the program resources that we have available. We already talked about the capacity maps with the disadvantaged community zones, but here are some additional resources that I think will be beneficial as you navigate through our program. First is our approved contractor network. This is the website that I mentioned earlier that is hosted by the joint utilities, and you can look up all of the participating charging station installers in our program. It's especially helpful if you don't know where to start, and you can look up companies that are approved to install in the Con Edison service territory. If you have a general contractor or an installer who's not on the list and you want to use them for your project, you don't have to worry. They can again fill out that application that takes a few minutes and be approved. For those of you who have multiple sites that you're applying for or in this program and you have to manage, you actually don't have to fill out that initial application that we mentioned on Clerk. You just have to fill out a multi-site application spreadsheet that you can use to apply for multiple sites at a time that will replace that Power Clerk step. So that is for 3 sites or more, you can use that form. And then you'll just email that completed spreadsheet to evmrp@coned.com. We also have additional templates and application guidelines that'll be helpful when you get to the service application step. And we can provide that via email, and those will be soon made ready, available on the website in a few months. And once a month, our program team will be hosting virtual office hours. So you can actually hop on to ask a quick question, talk through project scenarios, or get help filling out an application. And of course, you can always email us if you don't want to wait for that office hour, monthly office hour. Finally, we're hosting a customer webinar on May 27th from 10 to 11 a.m. for potential EV charging station owners and developers to review different rate options available for EV chargers. I highly recommend attending if you're interested in learning more about the rates. Next slide. Here's a quick snapshot of the program process. The gray boxes outline where the participants take action, and the blue boxes is what we at Con Edison are responsible for. For now, we do have a 2-step application process, but we are moving to a single application portal and project management system later this summer. Next slide.
Keep going.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yes, the previous slide, please. The first step is to submit the application to Power Clerk, and you're going to want to do this when you know the type and quantity of chargers you want to install. Next slide. The Power Clerk application is actually pretty straightforward. You will need to fill out the site information, charger information like end use, make, model, and quantity. And then there are some optional fields like project costs that you can fill out or wait until later in the process. Overall, the Power Clerk application should take you about 5 minutes to fill out. Like I mentioned, if you're planning to submit more than 3 projects at one time, you can opt to use the multi-site spreadsheet, which is here on the right. It doesn't replace the service application, but it will replace the Power Clerk application step, which is here on the left. And then you can email evmrp@coned.com to request the multi-site application if that applies to you. Next slide. Once the Power Clerk application is submitted, our team will then review it for program eligibility, and then we'll send you back an eligibility letter indicating the incentive tier that you'll likely qualify for. Next slide. Once you get the eligibility letter, you will then submit a service application into Project Center. Next slide. In the Project Center application, you will have to have fully fleshed out the details of the installation, because at that point, we'll be asking for more project details and contractor information. As part of the service application, you'll be required to provide the site plan, 1-line diagram, and load letter for the project. Next slide.
Oops, wait. Oh, wait. There we go.
Oh, yep. So you'll have to have the application letter, the letter of authorization, 1-line diagram, and the load letter. You'll also need to provide cut sheets, the program approval letter that we sent you, and the letter of authorization letting us know that we can communicate details with your selected contractor. Next slide, please. Once the service application has been submitted and your required documents are submitted, the project goes to engineering for design review, which will generally take about 30 days. During this review, we determine if you need any utility side upgrades and what those will cost. Once we determine that service adequacy, we will then communicate to you and submit your customer side costs And then we can look at your incentive tier, project cost, and communicate finally the incentive amount that we'll be able to issue to your project. So just a quick note here, because the incentive covers both utility side upgrades and customer side upgrades, the lower the utility side costs are, the more we can give you on the customer side. If at this stage you want to move forward with the project, the participant will then sign that program agreement, which then reserves the funds for that project on our side. You will then do construction on your side, and if you do need upgrades on our side, we will come in, construct our service, energize your site, and do that work verification. We will then submit invoices, and then we will cut you a check for the customer side rebate. And then again, the station will have to operate and report on operations for the next 5 years. Next slide. I'd like to close out by summarizing what party is responsible for what. And as you can see here, the participant is really responsible for the lion's share of that paperwork. So keep that in mind when you're deciding if you want to take that process on yourself, or have your contractor or developer act as the participant instead. Again, whoever takes the incentive will also be required to meet all of the program requirements, including reporting requirements. Next slide. Here is a list of some of the program resources. We have the program website, which can route you to the program application, the participant guide, the approved contractor network that's managed by the joint utilities, and also the capacity maps to look up not only the capacity, but also the disadvantaged communities. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to email evmrp@coned.com. We check this inbox on a daily basis. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining today and open it up for any questions that we have gotten in the chat for either our program or the NYSERDA program.
Thank you, Louisa. Can you hear me? This is Scott Fernquist from the GDP.
Yes, I can.
Hi.
Hello.
So I actually am going to help answer or ask some of these questions. We only have 13 minutes left, so I want to definitely get through some of these. And I just want everyone to know we will be posting this presentation. And Louisa was kind to provide that email, so they are available to answer any questions we don't get to today. You can definitely follow up with them after the webinar. So I want to start with some questions from Tom Kelly. He's from Purchase College. His first question is there a cap in a given year on the amount of projects that a contractor can provide to end-use customers?
Can you repeat that question, please?
So the question, I guess, is there a cap during a single year, I guess, on the total amount of projects or the value of the projects that a contractor can provide to a customer? So I guess, is there a limit to how much a contractor can work with a given Con Ed customer on these EV projects?
There is no cap on the customer and the customer and the contractor. There is a cap as it relates to, like, for example, if that contractor is the participant and serves as to provide all the paperwork and submit the application and everything, then there is a potential cap for how much each each participant can receive in this program. I have to double check on the exact number on that, but there is a cap for like the participant. So no cap on the relationship between the customer and the contractor, but there is, like, for example, a developer who might be submitting multiple applications. There are some limits to that, but I'll have to get back to everyone with that specific number.
Tom?
Hi, Scott, thanks. So my question was not so much from the Con Ed side of things, it was from the NYSERDA side in terms of contractors that can participate in a given year. If NYSERDA can speak to that, please.
Sure. Tom, in our program, the person who applies has to be the person that is going to own the equipment after the installation. So the contractor cannot apply in our program. It has to be the end equipment owner. that equipment owner is capped at $200,000 annually. So 50 ports. There is also a cap of 20 ports per location. So there's a couple of caps in there, but did that answer your question?
It did. It just a follow up, I guess. We've been approached by several contractors, and there's one contractor that we would like to work with, but they've been essentially capped for this year is concerned. We could talk offline, but just would appreciate some advice as to how to move forward in that capacity.
You guys are more than welcome to apply on your own behalf. What do you purchase college? Is that what it is?
Correct.
Yeah, purchase college. You guys are more than welcome to apply on your own behalf. Once you apply, you can have the contract can help you along with the application process. But you have to apply because you have to agree to all the rules and requirements of the program. We need your TIN. We need you to sign off on it, not the contractor. But
Great.
once you get in there, they can help you through the process.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so this should be a pretty quick question to answer. So the question is for PowerReady, is there a maximum distance for an electrical run to a panel that could be rebated? I don't actually know exactly what that means, but maybe you do.
Sure. I actually think what they're asking is like the distance that we're able to cover with the incentives. So it really can be understood in the sense for whatever equipment you actually need, we'll provide. But the incentive is, there's going to be a cap for what we can cover, and anything above and in excess of that cap, it'll have to be covered by the customer. So I guess we provide a minimum of the service, and then if it needs to be farther, distance from the panel, then that's something that the customer would most likely have to cover because it will probably then exceed the incentive cap that we have for each plug.
Okay, thank you. The next question is about wireless electric charging stations like plugless power. Are these eligible to receive rebates?
Our program, oh wait, those are chargers, right? So then it's David, sorry about that.
Yeah, currently there are no wireless chargers that meet the requirements of the program. So there's none that are available. Like I mentioned, you have to use a pre-approved equipment or a network provider, and there currently are none that meet the requirements. So right now, the answer is no. Will that change in the future? Possibly.
Okay, thank you, David. The next question is Smart Charge and the other programs described on slide 12, do they require paying into the system benefit charge?
I do not believe so. I think as long as you're a Con Edison customer, you are eligible to participate. In fact, with Smart Charge, you don't even need to be a Con Edison customer. You can commute. If you're a commuter that comes into the city, essentially, if you're in the Con Edison territory, if you're working or living here, you would be eligible.
Okay, thank you. So that wraps up Tom's questions. So moving on. So somebody's actually asking about, do we have a case study example of size, install costs, and incentives for, say, a charging station at a multi-family condo co-op location, let's say somewhere in central Westchester, Con Edison's territory. Do you have any case studies of that?
Our program is still very new, and so we only last week paid out on our first plug. So we're still working on kind of building kind of those success stories, but once it's available, we'll make sure to distribute. If you're not already on our mailing list, make sure you can either email us at evmrp@coned.com to be added to that list, and any kind of case stories or materials we'll be posting on the website and also sharing via that email distribution list. So nothing yet as of now, but we're working on it.
Okay, great. Well, this is very timely information. It seems like everyone's getting the latest info and can get in on the ground floor. So that's wonderful. So there was a question about, I think you actually might have answered it, David, if you're out there, David Policino, about if consulting engineers need to do anything special to participate. I know, Louisa, you mentioned an application they have to fill out online. Is there anything else that a potential, I guess, engineer or installer would need to do to basically get involved in this work?
Not on the NYSERDA program. Like I said, the equipment owner is the applicant to our programs. We don't have a list of certified installers or
Okay.
electrical contractors or anything like that. I will say that once the equipment owner has applied to the program, they can certainly get help with their installing contractor through the application process. Through uploading all the documents and answering the questions. And I kind of recommend it because, you know, the installing contractor is going to be one that has probably done multiple locations through this program, whereas the equipment owner is probably going to be doing it once. And they may have a couple of different sites, but typically it's a one-off program. So I recommend them working with their installing contractors.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thanks.
And then for us on Con Ed, we mentioned already in the slide, to receive the incentive, you have to be an approved contractor, and it's a very easy process to apply. And you can find that link on our PowerReady program webpage.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And actually, the first question came in from Kate Schmidt, and Kate, feel free to chime in if you want to follow up or ask anything else. But the question was about maintenance plans and warranties for charging stations. How long do they typically last? So like, how long is a charging station good for? And there was, I imagine the technology will most likely improve or drastically improve before the station breaks. So any comments on the lifetime of a charging station?
Yeah, we require 36 months of warranty for any of the chargers before they are pre-approved for our program. So that covers you for 3 years. We do require 5 years of data collection and the charger being operational for 5 years. Yeah, like with anything, and these in particular is such a new technology that they do drastically improve over time. But we're seeing, you know, and again, I guess it goes back to you get what you pay for, right? So if you're buying one of the better, more expensive chargers, they're going to last you a lot longer than if you're buying one on the cheaper side.
Exactly. Okay, if anyone else has any questions, we have a few minutes left. I think I got to most of them. There were some questions about, you know, does this info apply to other utility territories within New York, or, you know, there was a question about NYSEG. So it's my understanding that the NYSERDA benefits obviously are statewide, and what Con Edison presented today was for Con Edison territory only.
Yeah, I can touch on that really quickly.
Okay, great.
The make ready order that the Public Service Commission issued last summer is actually for a statewide program. So today I presented all of Con Ed's offerings, but all of the other utilities in your relevant service territory should have a similar program with similar kind of requirements. The budgets might be a little bit different because it's regional differences, to account for regional differences. But in terms of the structure and the requirements, those should all be quite similar.
Yeah, and the Charge Ready New York program is statewide. It's the same rebate levels for anywhere. I get a lot of questions asking if you have to pay into the systems benefits charge, like from Long Island customers, and the answer to that is no. Anybody who's eligible for Charge Ready.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Let's see. I'm getting more questions. Oh boy.
I think Kate just had another question.
Sorry, I'm having trouble seeing them right now. If
Kate, you want to unmute and ask your question?
that'd be easier.
I can actually see your question. Her question is asking if the companies offer longer warranties. And yes, they do. Almost all of them offer an extended warranty on their chargers. And typically they will cover the full 5 years that of the reporting requirements for the Charge Ready New York program. That's an additional cost though to the customer.
I just saw a question about O&R. So again, they have the same structure and you should be able to find similar information on their website.
And I believe that we have some contractors, installers, engineers on the call today. So if you want to raise your hand, go ahead. Yeah, there's Bonnie.
And
Hagan.
honestly, if you have any questions, you guys can always email us at that the email that we provided, evmrp@coned.com. We check that on a daily basis, and we usually can route it to the right resources. If you have specific questions about unique case scenarios, we are always open to having a call to discuss program specifics.
So we are going to send both presentations and the video recording. I apologize, missed the first couple of minutes, but the gist of it is here. And we're sending to everybody who signed up for this webinar, and then it will also be publicly posted on our presentations page on our website. So people will have all of this contact information that you provided.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Danny.
Yeah, so it's 1 o'clock, and this was just wonderful. So much great information. It's so exciting that that this is the future is now. And just the fact that you guys are sort of paving the way, and it's really exciting. Maybe a year from now, this will be an entire other conversation. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. And I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of people who are in touch with you and asking specific questions related to their situations.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
Have a great day, all.